My name is Erin Daniel. I'm 33 years old. And this is the story of how my own mother and sisters used me, until I stopped being the family doormat and took back my power in a way no one expected. It started on a gray Seattle morning, one of those Mondays where the clouds hang so low you feel like they're pressing against your skin. I had just finished my third espresso shot, eyes barely focused on the quarterly report lighting up my screen, when my phone began buzzing across the desk like a restless toddler. It was Natalie. Again. I ignored the first call, then the second. On the third, I picked up, half worried something had happened to her baby. "Hey, everything okay?" "Yes." She giggled. "Yeah, just wondering. Can you watch Minnie this afternoon? I have a spa thing with Claire, and Tim's stuck in meetings." A beat of silence hung between us before I answered. "Nat, I'm working. You realize it's Monday morning, right?" "Oh, come on. You're single. You can juggle. You always do." There it was. The line that had become her favorite weapon. "You're single." As if being unmarried and childless automatically made me available, disposable, less important. I hung up faster than I meant to. But the damage was already done. That call wasn't new. It was just the latest in a long line of requests. No expectations, that I drop everything for the sake of the real family members. Madison, the middle sister, with her perfectly curated suburban life and 2 rowdy twin boys. Natalie, the youngest, 6 months pregnant and newly married to a tech guy who couldn't boil an egg without calling her first. And then me, Sienna, eldest, the one with the corner office, the executive title, and absolutely no one in her corner when she needed it. To the outside world, I'm the CEO of a major medical supply firm. To my own family, I'm the free babysitter, the financial crutch, the invisible scaffolding holding their lives upright. I could write a novel titled, "Can You Just?" with every chapter named after a family favor that cost me sleep, money, or sanity. It was the birthday party that broke me. Mom's 60th was coming up. Madison called me first, voice syrupy sweet like she needed a kidney. "Cece," she chirped. Only my family still called me that. "We've got the most amazing idea. We're taking Mom somewhere unforgettable. A whole week at Moonberry Lodge. Snow, hot springs, the works." Sounded extravagant. Too extravagant. I asked. "Where is it again?" "Montana. But don't worry, Nat and I already paid our part. You just need to send like $3,000 to cover the rest. You're the one with the big bucks, right?" My throat tightened. I'd been saving for a hiking trip in Colorado. Something simple. Quiet. Instead, I swallowed the protest, smiled through the phone, and said the words they always expected. "Sure. Send me the details." They didn't, of course. A week passed. Then another. I kept trying to get specifics, dates, logistics, even a stupid itinerary, but the calls always ended with, "We're still figuring it out. Just hold the week open, okay?" Then came the dinner. Our parents' house in Tacoma smelled like rosemary chicken and fake peace. I brought a kale salad that no one touched. Natalie showed up glowing and pregnant, Madison wearing a ski jacket indoors like a runway model. Mid-meal, Natalie clapped like a game show host. "It's official. We're going to Moonberry Lodge. All the cabins are booked. Hot cocoa, sleigh rides, everything." The table buzzed with excitement. I blinked. Wait. The what? No one told me anything. Madison looked down at her plate like it had suddenly turned radioactive. Natalie smiled tight. "Well, yeah, I mean the trip's for the family. But Mom's dream was to relax without worrying about the kids, so we were thinking, you'd stay back. With them." I looked around the table. No one made eye contact. My mother stirred her wine like it held the answer to life's problems. "You mean," I said slowly, "you used my money to help pay for a trip I wasn't even invited to, and now you want me to babysit?" "You love the kids," Mom said with a weak smile. "You're so good with them. It just makes sense." In that moment I didn't feel sad. Felt nothing. And that scared me more than anger ever could. "Did it ever occur to you that I might want to come too?" asked voice low. "You hate snow," Madison said quickly. And besides, it's not like you'd have fun around a bunch of married couples with kids. You'd be bored. I sat there, invisible and necessary all at once. Like a power cord no one sees until they need to plug something in. No one said thank you. No one apologized. No one even flinched when I stood, left my plate half full, and walked out the front door without a goodbye. Back home that night I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't rage against the injustice. Instead, I opened my laptop and typed into the search bar, "Quiet beachfront resorts in California." That's when everything changed. It wasn't a grand plan. Not yet. But it was the seed. The first time in years I did something purely for myself. I booked a room in Santa Monica. Ocean view. By access. A place where no one would knock on my door needing help or hand me a crying toddler while telling me how lucky I was to be child-free. Then I sent one group message to the family chat. "I won't be babysitting during your trip. I've made other plans. The kids deserve a sitter who's prepared and available. I've hired someone professional." Silence. Then, one by one, the responses poured in. Accusations. Guilt. Emotional blackmail wrapped in emojis and passive-aggressive text walls. But this time I didn't fold. And that was only the beginning. By the next morning my phone was flooded. 47 missed calls. Tsunami of texts. Voicemails so long I didn't need to open them to know the content. My mother crying, Madison raging, Natalie swinging between disbelief and manipulation. They all had the same tone. "How dare you?" No one asked why. No one asked how I was doing. It was as if the world had flipped on its axis because, for once, I had said no. The most cutting message came from Natalie. "So you'd rather let strangers raise your nephews and niece than help your own flesh and blood? You've really changed, Cece. And not in a good way." That name, Cece. It used to be affectionate. Now it felt like a leash, a reminder of a version of myself I no longer wanted to wear. I didn't respond. Packed instead. My trip wasn't extravagant. 3 nights in a modest suite by the beach. I brought a single suitcase. No kid games, no diaper bags, no emergency snacks or meds. Just swimsuits, books, a sketch pad I hadn't used in a decade, and silence. The moment I stepped off the plane in Santa Monica and felt the sun warm my skin, something inside me cracked open. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding myself together until I was finally alone and no one needed me. My first night, I sat on the balcony with a glass of wine and watched the waves roll in. For the first time in years, I didn't have to be on call. My calendar didn't belong to someone else. My time was my own. I ordered room service. I watched a documentary. I fell asleep with a face mask on and not a single thought about anyone else's schedule. The next morning I walked barefoot on the sand. I didn't have to rush back. There were no appointments to juggle, no. "Hey Cece, can you just..." Texts buzzing in my pocket. There was only me and the sound of the tide. But even in paradise, guilt tried to creep in. I found myself checking my phone by habit. The messages kept coming. More frantic, more accusatory. "Madison, you think this is about money? It's about respect. You disrespected Mom on her 60th birthday. Natalie, we can't even enjoy the trip now. The mood's ruined. You just had to make it about you." Aunt Linda even chimed in. "You always seemed strong, Sienna. I never expected selfish from you." Selfish. That word had clung to me since childhood. The worst thing a girl could be, especially the oldest daughter. I had given everything. Time, money, love, patience. I had erased vacations, skipped birthdays of my own, cancelled dates with men who might have been more than flings, just to be the dependable one. And the one time I chose myself, I was selfish. That night, I walked to the end of the pier and sat alone watching families pass me by. Children with sticky fingers clutching ice cream cones. Couples leaning into each other. Laughter on the breeze. I used to imagine I'd have that one day. Partner. Maybe even a child. But somewhere between crisis calls and carpool pickups that weren't mine, I had quietly buried that dream under everyone else's lives. Cried. Not because I missed them, but because I realized I had missed me. When I returned to the hotel, I silenced my phone completely. The next morning I took a yoga class on the beach. A soft-spoken instructor guided us through breath and balance while gulls flew overhead. I was shaky, unsteady, but it felt good, like waking up from a coma. On day 3, I splurged on a massage. The therapist, a woman named Carla, had strong hands and an intuitive touch. Halfway through, she paused and said, "You carry everything in your shoulders, like the weight of someone else's world." I wanted to laugh. She had no idea. "Let it go," she whispered. "You don't need to carry that anymore." That night, I wrote a list in my journal. What I lost. A family vacation I was never truly invited to. The illusion of being appreciated. The role I thought made me worthy of love. What I gained. Peace. Clarity. Myself. And then I made a decision. I wouldn't go back to that old version of me. Not ever. I wouldn't chase their approval. I wouldn't beg to be seen. I wouldn't babysit for a trip I'd never been welcome to. I wouldn't shoulder responsibilities no one else shared. If they wanted to be angry, fine. If they wanted to cut me off, fine. If they wanted to call me cold, bitter, dramatic, so be it. Because for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't burnt out. I wasn't resentful. I wasn't invisible. I was free. On the final morning before my flight back, I stood at the edge of the water, feeling the waves brush against my feet like an apology from the earth itself. I whispered, "This is mine," to no one but the wind. When I returned to Seattle, my apartment felt different. The same soft light filtered through the windows. The same coffee mugs were stacked in the sink. But the air, it felt lighter, unburdened. And the messages, they were waiting. "Natalie, you've gone too far. I hope you know that. Madison, Mom's blood pressure went up because of you. Aunt Mel said she cried for hours. Mom, you don't get to choose when to be family. But here's the truth, you do. You do get to choose. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who respect your boundaries, who care about your well-being, who ask instead of expect." I didn't respond. I poured myself tea. I turned on soft music. And then I made the most radical decision of all. I blocked their numbers. Blocking them wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of self-preservation. I had spent 3 decades being the bridge, the fixer, the one who always called first after a fight. The one who apologized for not doing enough, even when I'd done everything. But after Santa Monica, I finally saw the truth. They didn't miss me. They missed the version of me that never said no. That week back home, the silence was deafening at first. No Natalie calling to ask if I could grab diapers on the way to her place. No Madison needing someone to pick up the twins from school. No mom guilt tripping me into family bonding dinners that I cooked, cleaned, and paid for. Just me. Just quiet. Felt unfamiliar. Like stepping out into the world without armor. I went back to work, and my assistant Tina noticed it first. "You look different," she said one morning, handing me a cappuccino. "Did you cut your hair?" "No," I smiled. "Just some dead weight." She laughed, but I didn't explain. How could I? That a simple vacation away from my family was the most radical thing I'd done in my adult life. At night, I'd light candles in my apartment and journal in long, unhurried paragraphs. I wrote about things I used to love. Painting, hiking, reading mystery novels with a glass of wine. Things I'd sacrificed without realizing. All for a family that saw my success not as something to celebrate, but as a resource to be used. One Saturday I walked by a community center and saw a sign. Night photography for beginners. 6-week course. I don't know what pulled me in, but I signed up. The old me would have canceled by the 2nd week. Some emergency would have come up. But now, no one was calling. No one was interrupting. And that night, holding a borrowed camera and learning how to capture the moonlight on Lake Union, I realized something even bigger. I wasn't lonely. I was finally alone with myself, and it felt like peace. But peace, I was learning, often makes people uncomfortable. The next intrusion came not by phone, but in person. It was a gray Thursday. I had just returned from a strategy meeting and was changing out of my blazer when I heard the knock. 3 sharp taps. I opened the door and there they were. My mother, Madison, Natalie. No warning. No invitation. Mom held the emergency key I had given her 10 years ago. The just-in-case key. She didn't even apologize for using it. "We need to talk," she said, stepping inside before I could say a word. Natalie followed, her belly now visibly bigger beneath her wool coat. Madison closed the door behind them like it was a courtroom. I stood frozen, heart pounding. Madison was first. "You left us with 5 kids. In the snow. Without saying anything." "I did say something," I replied calmly. "You just didn't hear me. You hired a stranger," Natalie snapped, "to watch our babies." I crossed my arms. "I hired a licensed professional. Someone trained. Someone who agreed to the job. Unlike me." Mom let out a long, disappointed sigh. "I raised you better than this, Sienna. You've become so cold. So selfish. What happened to the daughter I could rely on?" I looked at her, eyes steady. "She got tired." The words hung between us like thunderclouds. "You don't understand what it's like having young kids," Madison said, voice rising. "You go to your fancy office and sip lattes while the rest of us are wiping noses and fighting with toddlers." "You're right," I said, tone neutral. "I don't understand what it's like to have kids. But you don't understand what it's like to sacrifice your entire life to a family that treats your independence like a license to be used." They blinked. Silent. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself water, then turned to face them again. "Let's be clear," I said. "I didn't ruin your vacation. I didn't abandon anyone. I declined a job I was never asked to take. I funded a trip I wasn't invited to. And when I decided to live my own life, you all responded with guilt and rage. That's not love. That's control." Natalie looked stunned. Mom's face had gone pale. Madison's eyes burned. "You're breaking this family," Mom said, voice trembling. "No," I said gently. "I'm breaking the pattern. And maybe, just maybe, that's what this family needs." Madison slammed her purse on the counter. "Fine. Live your selfish life. Don't come crying to us when you end up old and alone." I nodded slowly. "If alone means having boundaries, peace, and self-respect, I'll take it." They left soon after. No hugs, no apologies. Just the echo of slamming heels and wounded pride. When the door shut, I exhaled. Not from relief. From rebirth. That night, I took a long, hot shower and washed off years of obligation. I made lemon tea, curled up by the window, and watched the rain trail down the glass. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel bad for choosing myself. Felt powerful. The next morning, I opened a map of Europe. Paris, Florence, Amsterdam. Cities I had dreamt of since college but never dared to visit. I booked the tickets. This time, no one was going to stop me. Booking that flight to Europe was like unlocking a door I never knew I had the key to. I chose Florence as my starting point. Something about the art, the history, the wine. It felt like the right place to begin rediscovering the pieces of myself I'd abandoned. I booked a boutique hotel tucked between cobblestone alleys, far away from anything familiar. I didn't check in with anyone, didn't text my plans, didn't ask for input. Because this time, my life didn't require anyone's approval. At the airport, I sipped espresso alone, flipping through a travel guide, and it hit me. I wasn't escaping. I was arriving into my own story. Not the sister. Not the babysitter. Not the ever-sacrificing daughter. Just Sienna. A woman on her way to live her dream. The flight was long, but I didn't mind. I watched the sunrise through the plane window, the clouds glowing gold and pink, and thought, this is what freedom looks like. When I stepped off the plane at Florence Airport, the air smelled different. Earthy. Ancient. Like possibility. At the hotel, I was greeted by an older man named Luca, who handed me a room key with a smile. "Signora Harper," he said with a nod, "you are our only solo guest this week. I hope you find what you are looking for." His words lingered. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I was closer than I had ever been. Over the next few days, I wandered through the Uffizi Gallery, stood breathless before Botticelli's Birth of Venus, and took a cooking class where I spilled flour and laughed for the first time in months. I walked along the Arno River at dusk, the sky melting into shades of rose and violet. I wrote in my journal every night, reflections spilling onto the page like truths I had been too afraid to say aloud. And with every step, every bite of gelato, every silent prayer whispered beneath cathedral ceilings, I healed. Until one morning a message came through. I had left my phone on silent, only checking it once every few days for work emergencies. But this one caught my eye. It was from Madison. "Mom's in the hospital. Blood pressure spiked. They said stress. You happy now?" My fingers trembled. I stared at the screen, my breath caught somewhere between fear and fury. The manipulation was so blatant I almost laughed. No context, no details, just guilt weaponized like a dagger. And then another from Natalie. "We don't need your help. Just thought you should know. Don't bother calling." I sat down on a stone bench in Piazza della Signoria, surrounded by tourists and pigeons, and let the phone fall into my lap. Could have responded. I could have let the panic twist me back into their control. But instead I asked myself, would they have told me if I hadn't cut them off? Would they have included me if I hadn't pushed back? The answer was clear. This wasn't about love. It was about control. They weren't informing me out of care. They were reminding me, look what happens when you choose yourself. I didn't respond. I turned off my phone again. That night, I attended a rooftop dinner hosted by a local artists collective. As the lights twinkled over the city, and strangers clinked wine glasses with mine, I felt something unshakable settle inside me. I would no longer apologize for my freedom. A few days later I moved on to Paris, then Amsterdam. And with every train ride, every unfamiliar street, I shed another layer of that old identity. I was no longer the one who dropped everything at a moment's notice. I was no longer the stand-in, the backup, the safety net. I was becoming the main character of my own life. Back home I heard nothing more from them. No calls, no updates. The silence, once terrifying, was now a kind of sanctuary. One evening, while walking through the flower market in Amsterdam, I saw a little girl tugging her mother's hand, begging for tulips. The mother smiled, knelt down, and handed her one. And I felt a strange tug in my chest. It wasn't longing. It was clarity. I realized that while I might not have children of my own, I was mothering someone more important right now, myself. The woman I had ignored for too long. The child inside me who had once been told, "You're the strong one, you don't need help." I was finally holding her hand, finally listening. When I returned to Seattle, the apartment welcomed me like an old friend. The plants had survived. The books were where I left them. But everything felt changed. And in the center of my kitchen counter, where I had taped the Europe itinerary weeks before, I now placed something new. Letter. To myself. Dear Sienna, you are not selfish. You are sacred. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to live. It was dated and signed. A reminder in ink and conviction. A few days after I got back, I opened the family group chat. Yes, the one I had left weeks ago. They had added me back in. The messages were still there. Passive-aggressive updates. Bitter comments. Silent digs. But something else stood out. Voice note. Mom. I hesitated. Then I hit play. Her voice, though tired, was different. I don't know if you'll listen to this. But I wanted to say, I didn't realize how much I relied on you until you stopped showing up. And maybe that wasn't fair. Maybe it never was. I pause. I'm still angry. But I'm also thinking. If you're willing to talk, I'd like to understand. I miss you. I sat still. No tears. Just a quiet knowing. The story wasn't over. But the power was back in my hands now. I didn't respond to my mother's voice message right away. I replayed it once, then again, sitting on my couch with my journal open in my lap and a cup of peppermint tea going cold beside me. Her voice was softer than I expected, almost unsure. And that shook me more than if she had yelled. Because for the first time in my life, she wasn't demanding anything. She was asking. Still, I wasn't ready. Just because someone misses you doesn't mean they understand you. And I wasn't going to trade my hard-earned peace for a conversation I wasn't ready to have. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life. Not the life of endless obligation I had been living before, but one built on boundaries and choice. I started my mornings by asking myself, what do I want today? Some days the answer was simple, a long walk through the park. Other days it was more profound, to not feel guilty for existing outside their needs. My therapist. Yes, I started therapy too, called it reclaiming agency. Called it finally breathing. The transformation didn't happen all at once. It was slow and steady, like thawing after years of frostbite. I unsubscribed from guilt. I muted the group chat again. And I stopped explaining myself to people who had never made room for my voice anyway. Still, something in me softened when I passed by a bakery and saw a mother holding her daughter's hand while they picked out cookies together. Thought of Mom. I remembered her homemade peach cobbler, the way she used to tuck my blanket in when I fell asleep on the couch as a kid. I didn't doubt that she loved me, but somewhere along the line, that love had become transactional. And love should never feel like debt. One evening I received a message, not from Natalie or Madison, but from someone unexpected. And Cora. We hadn't spoken in years. She was my mother's older sister, always the black sheep of the family. Lived alone. Traveled often. Unmarried. Free. The message was short. I heard what happened. Just wanted to say, I'm proud of you. Takes guts to choose yourself. Call me sometime if you want to talk to someone who gets it. Tears sprang to my eyes before I could stop them. She got it. It hit me then. I wasn't alone. There were women before me, like Aunt Cora, who had chosen themselves and been punished, dismissed, or written off for it. And there would be women after me who needed to know it was okay to say, no more. That night I called her. We talked for 2 hours. About Europe. About family patterns. About how being the responsible one often meant being the one who was never allowed to break. And when I hung up, I felt lighter. The next day, I did something I hadn't done in years. Painted. Not for anyone else. Not for a niece's birthday or a charity auction. Just for me. It wasn't perfect. Shaky lines, weird shading, but it was mine. I hung it in my hallway like a flag of freedom. Later that week, I finally called my mother back. She answered on the second ring. Sienna. Her voice cracked. I didn't think you'd. I listened to your message, I said quietly. A long pause followed. The kind that only exists between people who have hurt and been hurt. I didn't call to argue, she said. I don't know. I've been thinking about everything. About how much I expected from you. About how I never really asked what you wanted. Closed my eyes. Mom, I love this family. But I can't be the only one holding it up. I know, she whispered. Another pause. I didn't know how much I relied on you until you stepped away. That's the problem, I said. You only saw what I gave. Not what it cost. She didn't defend herself. She didn't raise her voice. She just sighed. I'm sorry, she said finally. I know that doesn't fix everything. But I am. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. That's a start. We didn't talk long. Just enough to acknowledge the cracks. Just enough to make space for something new. I didn't forgive everything in that moment, but I began. What surprised me most was what happened next. 3 days later, Madison sent me an email. Not a text. Not a voice note. An email. It was formal. Titled, An Apology, I Think I Owe You One. She wrote about how chaotic the Montana trip had actually been. How the professional sitter I hired was better than they'd expected. Kind, patient, and able to handle the kids better than anyone anticipated. She admitted she hadn't realized how much I had been doing until she tried to do it herself. I didn't think you'd actually say no, she wrote. I thought you'd do what you always do, suck it up. Fix it. Smile anyway. When you didn't, I panicked. But maybe that's on me. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Few days later, Natalie messaged me too. Just one line. If I ever get to where you are, knowing who I am, choosing peace, I hope I remember to thank you. I read it 3 times. I didn't reply. Not yet. Some doors opened slowly. Others you keep locked a little longer while you're still healing. But I knew this much. I had changed. And the ripple of that change was finally reaching the shore. I wasn't waiting for their full understanding anymore. Had my peace. And that was more than enough. The days that followed were quiet. Not because there was nothing happening, but because for once, I wasn't scrambling to meet everyone else's needs. My life, once filled with calendar reminders for someone else's errands, school pickups, last-minute favors, had become filled with white space. It was in that space that I found myself again. One Saturday morning, I walked down to the local bookstore, a small, sun-drenched shop tucked away on a corner in Capitol Hill. I bought a copy of Women Who Run with the Wolves and a leather-bound journal with a golden clasp. The owner, a woman with silver-streaked curls, smiled and said, "That book changes people." "I think I'm already in the middle of changing," I said. And I meant it. That afternoon I started writing a letter. Not to Madison. Not to Natalie. Not even to my mother. It was to me. The Sienna who once held her phone in trembling hands, waiting for a crumb of appreciation. The Sienna who cancelled dates with kind men because her sister had an emergency and no one else could be trusted with the kids. The Sienna who drove in the rain at midnight with soup for her mom and still got criticized the next morning for not using the right kind of noodles. I wrote to her like she was my younger sister. Someone I finally realized deserved protection too. "You were never cold," I wrote. "You were exhausted. You were never selfish. You were starved of boundaries. You were never invisible. You were simply expected to disappear so others could shine brighter. But not anymore. See you. I'm with you. And I'll never let them silence you again." I folded the letter and placed it in the back of my journal like a vow. The next week, I received an invitation in the mail. A baby shower for Natalie. Cream-colored paper, gold foil lettering. RSVP requested by the following Friday. No personal note. No hope to see you there. Just my name on the list, as if nothing had happened. For a moment I stared at it, torn between 2 instincts. One that whispered, "Be the bigger person," and the other that asked, "What did they ever grow to meet you halfway?" In the end, I made a decision. I would go, but only as myself. Not as the helper. Not as the planner. Not as the backup childcare. I wouldn't bring diaper bags. I wouldn't show up early to hang decorations. I wouldn't stay late to clean up crumbs from a cake I hadn't eaten. I bought a beautiful handmade baby blanket from a local artisan, wrapped it in soft paper, and added a small card that read, "Wishing you warmth, peace and boundaries." The shower was held in Mom's backyard. I hadn't been there since that final confrontation in my apartment. When I walked in, the energy shifted instantly. Conversations dipped. Eyes widened. I could feel them watching. Natalie, swollen and glowing, was seated in the middle of a circle of pastel balloons. She glanced up and offered a tight smile. "Sienna, you came." I nodded, keeping my tone neutral. "I did." There was an awkward pause before she motioned to the gift table. "You can leave it over there if you want." I placed the gift gently among the others. I didn't linger. Madison approached me a few minutes later, holding a glass of lemonade like a prop she didn't know what to do with. "Thanks for coming," she said stiffly. "Mom's glad you're here. I think." I smiled slightly. "I'm here for Natalie." She bit her lip. "Sienna, look. I know we haven't been great. But you kind of caught us all off guard." I tilted my head. "That's the point of a boundary. It only works when it changes what people expect of you." Madison exhaled. "I'm not used to this version of you." "Neither am I," I said. "But I like her." Before she could say anything else, a distant voice called, "Madison, we need more forks." She looked over her shoulder, hesitating, then turned back. "You were right," she said quietly. "It shouldn't have taken you disappearing for us to notice how much we expected from you." It wasn't a full apology. But it was more than I thought I'd get. I stayed for an hour. I didn't hold the babies. I didn't offer to help cut cake. I didn't explain where I'd been or why I'd changed. I simply stood in the truth of who I was becoming. And when I left, I didn't say goodbye to everyone. Just to Natalie. I hugged her gently and whispered, "You're going to be a wonderful mom if you remember to also be your own person." She didn't respond, but her eyes glistened. Back in my car, I exhaled deeply. That had been harder than I expected. Not because of their silence or side eyes, but because I realized how deep the old patterns had run. I had to fight every instinct to offer, to help, to shrink myself again. But I didn't. I stood tall. I left on my own terms. And that, more than anything, was healing. That night, I cooked myself a celebratory dinner. Lit a candle. Played Nina Simone's Feeling Good in the background. I poured a glass of wine, toasted the quiet, and whispered aloud, "I'm proud of you." 'Cause I was. This wasn't about revenge. It never really had been. This was about becoming the kind of woman I once thought only existed in fiction. Independent, unbothered, whole. A woman who could love without losing herself. Who could show up but not bow down. Who knew that family meant nothing without mutual respect. The old Sienna would have tried to rebuild the bridge. The new Sienna knew some bridges needed to burn, so you could build a home on the ashes. The weeks after Natalie's baby shower felt like standing on the other side of a storm. Everything was quieter, calmer, but not untouched. The cracks remained, but for the first time, I wasn't rushing to fill them. I was letting the silence be what it was. I returned to work with renewed focus. Not the overworked frenzy I used to carry like a badge, but a grounded steadiness. Came in on time. I left on time. I didn't check my emails at midnight. And still nothing fell apart. The hospital partnership I'd been spearheading finally closed. My CEO title no longer felt like armor, but an extension of my capability. Not something to prove, just something I had earned. And more importantly, I no longer felt guilty for having a life outside of it. One morning in April, as cherry blossoms drifted across my windshield in delicate pink swirls, I stopped by a local cafe after therapy. I was sipping my cappuccino when I heard someone call my name. Sienna. Turned. It was Marissa, from the night photography class. She smiled, tucking her camera bag under her arm. "You still painting?" "Every week," I said. She beamed. "Still planning that Florence trip?" I grinned. "Actually, I leave in 2 months. Florence, then Paris, then Amsterdam." She whistled. "Bucket list." "No," I said. "Finally living list." That made her laugh. "I like that." She told me she'd just come back from a solo road trip through Oregon, photographing waterfalls. "When women travel alone, people assume we're lost," she said. "But I think it's the opposite. It's when we're most found." We exchanged numbers. Maybe I'd have a travel buddy for part of Italy after all. Back home, I sat by the window with my journal and wrote, "I used to think my life was meant to orbit around others. Now I see it was always a solar system of its own. I was just letting others play the sun." That afternoon, I cleaned out a drawer I hadn't touched in years, the family drawer. Birthday cards from Madison's twins. Natalie's wedding invite. A dried rose from Mom's 60th birthday I'd paid for but wasn't invited to attend. I placed everything in a box and labeled it. Past roles. Not trash. Not resentment. Just closure. I kept one photo, a Polaroid of me and my sisters when we were young, standing barefoot in the grass outside our childhood home, all 3 of us laughing so hard our eyes were nearly shut. I pinned it to the fridge with a magnet that said, "Grow through what you go through." 'Cause I still loved them. I just didn't love what our relationship had become. The next week I made a final change. I called Mom, not out of guilt but because I was ready. The line rang 5 times before she picked up. "Sienna," she said, sounding unsure. "Hi," I said gently. I wanted to talk. Just to level things out. She didn't speak for a moment. Then, "I wasn't sure I'd hear from you again." "I needed space," I said. "And I still do. But that doesn't mean I hate you." I just needed to figure out who I was when I wasn't being what everyone else needed. She sighed. I see that now. I don't like it, but I see it. I'm going to Europe this summer, I told her. Alone. 'Cause I want to. Not because I'm running from anything. There was a long pause. I hope it brings you joy, she finally said. I truly do. We didn't solve everything in that call. But we began a new chapter. One where I wasn't just the daughter who gave, but a person who could say what she needed, too. Later that evening I took a walk along the pier. The air smelled like salt and freedom. A little girl ran past me, squealing with joy as her father chased after her. I smiled, not with longing but with peace. I had stopped measuring my worth by whether or not I had children, or a husband, or anyone to claim me. I belonged to myself now. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of red wine and my travel itinerary spread out beside me. Florence, Paris, Amsterdam. I imagined myself in each place, standing before the Duomo, sipping espresso by the Seine, biking past tulips and canals. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a supporting character in someone else's life. I was the author, the lead, the whole damn story. Before going to bed, I opened my journal one last time and wrote, "This is not revenge. This is not rebellion. This is reclamation. And I'm finally free." Sienna's story is a powerful reminder that self-worth doesn't come from being endlessly needed. It comes from being seen, respected, and heard. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty, it's courage. Loving your family doesn't mean surrendering your identity. If you've ever been the one who gives until there's nothing left, maybe it's time to ask, what would it look like if I chose myself for once? Tell us in the comments. Have you ever had to walk away to find your voice? What did it cost you and what did you gain? And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Echoes, where we give voice to stories that deserve to be heard. Because sometimes the loudest revenge is living free.